Hello, thank you for joining me on the session today, all about how to deliver zero-touch device deployments with Microsoft Autopilot. I think over the last year or so, we've had a radical change in the way that IT is delivered across the business. And one of the areas that we do need to look at is how we deploy and then manage and maintain devices through their life cycle. My name is Barry Coombs, and I am the Chief Technologist here at Computer World. And I've spent a long time specializing in end-user computing technologies, specifically the managed desktop type technologies like VDI, session-based computing, and more latterly, having a look at desktop as a service. So joining me on the session today is Ollie Restorick, one of my architects here at Computer World. Ollie, do you just want to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about your history, how you've come to get involved with automation of desktop deployments and involved in specifically the Autopilot technology?
Absolutely. So my interest in deployment goes back longer than I care to remember, back to when a colleague rocked up at work with a floppy disk in his hand saying, look what I've just found in the floppy drive of a PC I've just bought from a high street retailer. And what that floppy disk contained was actually a load of scripts that automated the deployment of Windows 95 onto those machines. And we unpicked the scripts. We were all quite excited about this and managed to reverse engineer what was going on and work out our own method of deploying Windows 95, which I then took forward over many years, refined through Windows 2000 and upwards by basically hacking the CD-ROM drive of what Microsoft provided with winnt.cif files and all sorts of unattended scripts. And that was basically burning many CDs. So I ended up with big piles of CDs, just going through iterations of experiment, didn't quite work as I wanted. Let's try something better. Let's try something different and going through that way. Fast forward a few years and you've got many tools like Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, SCCM, and other techniques of doing that, and bring us on today into Windows Autopilot.
Fantastic. So you must have ended up with many kind of coasters around the office from those failed CDs as we all had back then.
Hundreds.
As much as we like technology like floppy disks and CD-ROMs, and Ollie, you and I like to reminisce about the good old times of when technology was maybe a little bit simpler. Things have moved on now. Things are very much moving out to the edge. They're moving out to cloud deployments, and we see lots of people looking at Autopilot. So we've got a lot to cover today. We've got an agenda there where we hope to be able to educate you a little bit more as to what actually Autopilot is, what you're going to need to be able to use it inside your organization, how it hangs together. What does the architecture look like, and what does it feel like to use it from both a user perspective and an administrator perspective? And then finally, some advice on how do you kind of get started with this? How do you start that journey? So, Ollie, to get us started then, first of all, can you give us a bit of a background, kind of what tools are in use today or have been in use that Autopilot is now replacing? And actually, what is Autopilot?
Yeah, absolutely. So the older tools are sort of the Windows Deployment Toolkit, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, SCCM, and those types of image-based tools where you basically take the PC that's given to you by the manufacturer, ignore all the software that they ship with it, and put your own lovingly handcrafted image down on top of that. So Autopilot is taking a very different approach. And one of the main reasons for why that's come about is because every 6 months, we've got a new version of Windows 10 coming. So in the olden days, it used to be that you'd put out your Windows XP or Windows 7 machine, and not do very much to it, to be completely honest, until that PC either went wrong or it was replaced. That doesn't work today. So really, you want to take that fresh image from the manufacturer and do the minimum you can to it to get the right apps onto it, get it configured, and then onboard it, and very importantly, into a management platform of your choice.
And definitely, and I suppose by doing that, you're getting to a point of standardization, which from a support perspective is the epitome, really. Because the problem is if you go out there and buy a bunch of devices, and I know this was me in the past, I start doing it, and on one thing I follow the list letter by letter as to what I've got to do. The second one I forget something. The third one, it's starting to look really shaky, and things are getting very different. By having a layer, whether that is back in the day was Norton Ghost on the CD we used to fight for in the office, or today that's Autopilot, you're getting that standardization. And an important part, which is why it's relevant today, is that Windows 10 is that continual evolution of the Windows desktop and what's going on with that Windows desktop.
Absolutely. So back in the day, it would have been companies of, let's say, under 100 users. It would have been quite a lot of investment to automate these platforms and make those images when you're not deploying that many PCs per day, per week. Obviously, as the company gets a lot bigger, the benefits of automation really come to the fore. So what Autopilot can do is, for very little investment and very little upfront time, is give you those automation benefits.
Fantastic. So over the last year, obviously, we've seen quite a big change happening to the way IT is delivered across the board, really. I mean, we've seen large changes in the world, really. But specifically, what have you seen when it comes to device deployment that is making Autopilot even more relevant today than it would have been a year ago?
I think COVID-19 is the very, very obvious answer to that one. So the older tools are really geared around the idea that everyone is in an office. PCs don't leave the office. All your applications are based in your own personal data center. And that's what group policy, MDT, SCCM have all been engineered on the assumption of. And that just doesn't hold today. Applications are in the cloud, typically, if not all of them, quite a lot of them. And management is also moving out to the cloud, and endpoints are moving away from the office.
Definitely. So yeah, so it's a complete change. And whilst I think we were already on that journey, I think it was happening. It was going to be 5 years or so before we probably ended up where we are today. We've gone through this, I think as VMware called it, we kind of responded. We put whatever we could into place to make people work. We then got to a point of reflection, which maybe lots of people are at the moment. Have I done the right things? What else do I need to do? How can I make it better? And then you get to a point of refactoring, which is this point where you go, right, I can see actually what I need to do now is, whilst people are now working from home and we've got teams working, I need to tighten the security, and I need to change my deployment methodologies from things like Acronis or SCCM to more modern things like Autopilot. So in terms of Autopilot, what do I need? How do I get it? What makes up Autopilot and the things that you need around it?
Absolutely. Autopilot really is two technologies that are needed to make it actually work. One is Azure Active Directory Premium. And what that does is allows you to onboard the device into your MDM platform, which is going to be Intune or Endpoint Manager, to use current terminology. So those are really the licensing things you need. And then basically you need a device that is from a supported vendor who works with the Microsoft Autopilot scheme there. And the logos are on there. There's basically every manufacturer that you know, and some you don't.
Definitely. So what you'll find is lots of people, if they haven't already got the licensing that is including this, will probably be on a forward momentum to be ending up there anyway. So as you're going from Office 365 to Microsoft 365, you're going to end up probably with the right Azure versions. You're going to end up with Intune. So this seems to be a logical move. And I think what a lot of people will see as they do that is legacy technologies that you've used to manage and maintain components that you use to secure them will start to not be needed. So there's going to be, whilst you're going to end up paying more money to Microsoft for that licensing, there is going to be a cost saving overall there for what is needed. So in terms of, so we've got those right licensable components there. We've got Azure Active Directory, we've got Intune. We're working with one of the major vendors that you had on your slide there to make sure we can do it. What does the architecture look like from a very high level? What needs to happen to make Autopilot work?
Absolutely. So with Windows Autopilot, the manufacturer is not putting down any different type of image to what Microsoft gives you on that DVD or that download. So they're not customizing anything in particular about Windows when they ship a PC with Autopilot. With the slight proviso that they may not be installing any adware or any trial versions of any software. That's the only difference there. So this is a vanilla Windows image that's coming down on that PC to you. But the difference, the thing they have done, is they've taken the hardware hash of that PC and uploaded it into Microsoft's Autopilot system on your behalf, or it can be done by the distributor or other parties. So what that hardware hash does, if you've ever installed Windows 10 and you've then reinstalled and realized, just wait a minute, it's not asked me if I need to license the PC. It already knows it's licensed. That is also a hardware hash that's doing that. So at the point in the Windows out-of-box experience where Windows will say, we're connecting to Microsoft to look for updates, that's exactly the point in time when that hardware hash is being submitted from your PC. And the hardware hash includes basically things like your serial number of your PC, the processor, and a few other aspects of it. When that is uploaded and matched against the hardware hash that's in Windows, that's the point where Windows will do something slightly different in the out-of-box experience and ask a slightly different set of questions. So there's in this slide, there's two different scenarios. On the left-hand side there, where the hardware hash is being uploaded, that's the scenario where the device is going to be delivered directly to the end user. for unboxing without passing through IT. There's also another mode where you've got some existing devices potentially that you want to then reboot, rewipe, and then enroll into Autopilot. And that's what the scenario in the middle is covering as well.
Fantastic. So I think to summarize then, so effectively what we're doing is you're working with the likes of Computer World to go out there and buy your devices from the named manufacturers that support this process, which is most of them, looking at that, unless you want to go and buy a MacBook Pro, seems to be probably the obvious one that's missing. This is a Windows 10 centric technology. We're telling that vendor, we're able to pair the piece of hardware that's coming to you with the configuration tools that are going to be used to configure it, to secure it behind the scenes in advance before that happening. And what we're avoiding happening is the need for the Ghost CD, the Acronis log, the SCCM install to come in, have that extra step where IT has to get their fingers all over the nice new laptop, and we're able to ship it direct to the user. So when they log in, that customization happens in real time. It's improved and better experience.
Absolutely, and this works both in the remote scenario and in the office-based scenario. I know in previous places I've worked where you order PCs in bulk. They go and sit in the basement for months, not getting used. Meanwhile, users are using their older PCs, and IT just haven't got the time to put these PCs out, get them out there. So this solves both the remote working problem and also the problem of getting PCs dished out in an office environment.
Definitely. And I suppose in the remote working environment, this is even more important, because the last thing you want to do is get all the devices in and then ship them out to all the people. If someone like Computer World can take the list of where they all need to go, they're delivered direct to the users, they're customized on demand. You've got rid of a load of hassle and a load of overhead in terms of time to be able to go and do that.
Absolutely.
So I understand next on the slide when we bring up, you've put a few screenshots together as to what the users will see, is it? So if we play that, you can talk over it.
Yeah, this next one is actually what you see with Windows if you don't do anything. This is the non-autopilot experience of first boot of Windows. And you're asked question after question that an end user is just not going to be able to know what to answer to any of these questions. Who owns the device? All these sorts of things. I think there's 15 questions there that you need to get going before you can even use the computer. And at the end of it, the device isn't managed and you haven't got any apps on there either. And it's not domain joined. User can't log in using their own credentials. Not a great experience. So if we can move to the next one, which is actually the demo of what happens with Autopilot.
There we go.
Yeah, I've shortened this one. This isn't me ducking out of doing a live demo. This process will take about 40 minutes in total. So that would be a very dull presentation to watch of spinny things going around. But what this is showing really is the first boot experience of a Windows Autopilot PC. And it's just starting up. This PC is already on the network. If it was a laptop, you'd be asked to join the wireless network. And at that point, the hardware hash is being put up into Microsoft, and it knows it's doing something different here. So here we've got a screen that is customized to the organization. It's got the logo and the branding on there. And the user is able to log in with their familiar username that they use for Office 365 and their password that they know. Easy login.
So this is very similar to an out-of-box experience with something like an iPhone or something like that. It's not your device is ready to use, and we can get into a way that maybe you can deliver that in a bit. But this is very similar to an initial setup process they will be familiar with an iPhone or an Android phone or something like that.
Absolutely. And what we've got here is a customized screen. It's actually called the ESP, or the enrollment status page. And what this is showing us is, or showing the end user, is what's happening during the deployment, what steps are happening. And really the purpose of this this page is so that the user doesn't get dumped onto a desktop before all the apps are down. It makes sure that when this process is finished, the user's got a nice working PC with their apps properly configured, properly managed. Definitely,
because at the end of the day, that's what they want, isn't it? I mean, if they can get this device earlier, we've communicated, look, it's going to have an initial setup process, which is really easy. We're here to support you with that if you need any help with the questions we've been asked. But it should be very direct. You're using things that you already know or have already been informed about, while the device is just doing these initial setup actions for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So this ESP page, we're going to see it again in a second. This is actually optional. You could bypass the ESP, but I probably wouldn't recommend it. You're probably going to want the user to get their hands on the device when it's good and ready, and when everything's in place.
We're seeing the initial few screens here that we're just getting your PC ready for you. Anyone that's done a brand new PC unboxing will be very familiar with this. This is where the customization and policy is being applied behind the scenes, I assume, Ollie?
Yep, that's right. So it's getting enrolled in MDM at this point on the last reboot, and then we're doing some user-specific stuff at this point. So this is user profile getting built and similar. But again, just need to know that. So this is user-specific stuff that's just happening at the last little leg of this.
It's nice that the user is getting this input as to what's happening, where it is, rather than just seeing the donut of death that they might assume something's gone a little bit wrong.
Yeah, and talking of things going wrong, there is a configuration option you can say to say how long this is going to take to go, and if it's sort of taking hours, it will abandon that and give you a customized message to phone support. On the screen now, actually, we've configured it also to configure the Windows Hello Convenience pin. Again, this is optional, but for the niceness for the user, we've just said, actually, you can use a pin to log in on that device. And we've tied it in with getting a text message as well to prove who they are. So,
I assume with Hello, you can use things like, is it the biometrics that if you've got a Surface Pro or something like that, you could use that at that stage as well. And these are all kind of the Azure Active Directory features, aren't they, that are being integrated directly at this stage?
Completely. So this is setting up the Windows Hello Convenience pin at this point. So nice 6-digit pin. That's not my date of birth at all.
It's very clever, the authentication stuff behind the scenes in Azure Active Directory, how it evaluates the right thing to use at the right time.
Yeah, and of course, the advantage of a Windows Convenience pin is that it's tied to that device, so that pin is useless on any other device. And right at the end of this process, we've got Word installed as an example. The apps are down, the device is configured, it's managed, it's BitLockered. The BitLocker key is stored in Azure Active Directory. And it's all good.
Brilliant. So from that perspective, if we kind of talk about some of the things that we would have configured during that initial stage, we've got things in there like the firewall, I assume you would have been configured. If you've got a corporate background, you would have configured that. What are some of the things that you'd be configuring? And where do those configuration items sit? Are they part of the Azure? Are they Intune? What is going on where?
Yeah, they're almost exclusively Intune settings at this point. So Autopilot is concerned with customizing that out-of-box experience and making sure all those questions that are presented at the start of Windows are answered, and that everything is configured properly. The rest of the settings, as I say, are Intune settings. So you could pre-populate Wi-Fi settings. You can configure what happens with data loss prevention, all sorts of things with Intune.
Fantastic. So this isn't just a high-level configuration. When you're getting that MDM or enterprise mobility management solution in there, it's a complete deployment of what is going on there. And of course, this technology can be used with other providers such as Workspace ONE or something like that in a slightly different way, using the Azure Active Directory technology, using that Autopilot, but you're using a different EMM or MDM platform if you need to.
I think now's actually a really good time to talk about the hybrid options you have as well with Autopilot. So what I've presented here is a nice deployment straight into Azure AD for the nice cloud-only option where there's no on-prem AD. This can also work with on-prem AD. And the way that works is it'll need a line of sight to a domain controller through a VPN. But at the point where the user first logs in a hybrid scenario, the user needs to be able to see that domain controller. But aside from that, really nice technology to be able to work with either hybrid or pure Azure AD environments.
Definitely. So I suppose depending on the customer, where they are on their cloud journey and things like that, we've got those. But we've also got a number of different deployment scenarios, haven't we, in terms of how you can use this, whether it's the version that you've just shown or maybe different ones. You want to kind of customize it a little bit more for the users. Yeah,
absolutely. So what I've demonstrated there is a user-driven mode where the device is shipped directly to the end user and they do the unboxing and they turn it on for the first time and everything is deployed. As I said, that probably takes around 40 minutes, which is a reasonable kind of compromise where that user is completely remote. Where you've got an IT person who could get involved and actually make that an easier process, you could do what's called a pre-provisioned deployment, or what was formerly called white glove. And that's where an IT technician is unboxing it carefully and doing the lengthy bits of installation, like installing the apps and things like that, all through Autopilot, all automated. But it's taking some of the time out for the end user who, when they finally unbox the PC, they've got a PC that's bespoke to them. So we also have self-deploying mode, which is where a PC can be not targeted to a particular person, but there's virtually no keystrokes. If you plug in with Ethernet, you can actually configure it to just launch straight into Autopilot and do a generic build for your organization without any interactions, without any logins on your part, just to prepare PCs. So that would be a really nice thing where you've got a build lab in your organization. You're doing many PCs at a time, unboxing them, plugging them in, letting them bake for 40 minutes, and then putting that on people's desks. And we also have scenarios around existing devices there. So there's PowerShell scripts that if you've got PCs already in the environment that you want to then retrospectively use with Autopilot, that scenario is covered as well.
Definitely. So whilst you kind of, the scenario you gave there is probably the typical deployment that you see Autopilot being used in. If your business doesn't want to work like that, if you do want IT to have a touch on it, if it's going out to an exec that you want to make sure that it's quick and up and ready to run as quickly as possible, but he still gets that box fresh experience, you can use those tools in different ways to meet that end goal that is needed. So I suppose the next bit is, can you just give us a bit of an overview as to how you administer the Autopilot components?
Absolutely. So there's a few different relevant bits. You can go forward one slide, Barry. Thank you. This is where you configure basically the guts of Windows Autopilot. So it's around the out-of-box experience configuration. And the two bits are, let me just maximize that so I can read them. The enrollment status page, bottom right of the four things, and automatic enrollment are the two primary bits where you configure these two settings. Automatic enrollment is a really, really simple option. It just tells it to use MDM as the provider and provides some URLs and some bits and bobs. I haven't got a screenshot of that one. The enrollment status page is somewhat interesting. If you can go to the next page, please, Barry. So this is configuring the out-of-box experience. Relatively simple set of options, really, around what deployment mode you want to do. So there's wizards there for the user-driven and the four other deployment modes that we had. Whether you're going to join it to Azure AD primarily, or whether it's going to be hybrid joined, as in on-prem AD joined and Azure. And you can either choose to show or hide some things like license terms, privacy settings, etc. Whether you want to simplify it for the user and get rid of some of those extra screens that they might see. The white glove UBI setting, that was what I was talking about with the pre-provisioned deployment, or white glove. And that's really a simple setting, a simple key combination that you specify on the first screen, which is basically hit the Windows key 5 times. That is what launches white glove. So fairly simple set of controls there. If you can go to the next one, please, Rory. So we've got also some settings around what's going to be shown on the enrollment status page is what these are. Whether an error message is going to be set after, let's say, 60 minutes, whether there's a custom time limit, what the message is going to be if it fails, whether you want to allow users to restart the experience, whether they can collect the logs, etc. And the final one is company branding. So this is configured actually in Azure AD. It's the same company branding you might have configured already for your Outlook web app and other portal customizations. But that's really the settings that are bespoke to Autopilot. On top of that, of course, there's an Intune configuration to get all the apps in place and to get all that working. And if you're doing VPNs, there's going to be some extra work to get the VPN up and running for the hybrid deployment option.
Definitely. And I think that's getting the Autopilot bit up and running, as we've seen there, is fairly straightforward. What you then need to think about is what is the onward journey, because doing just that Autopilot piece doesn't do much for the user. It's then the advanced customization, it's the security, it's the applications and those bits and pieces. And typically that's where we see us kind of going through and looking what is in place today, what needs to be in place, what the group policies are like and things like that. So should we touch upon where should someone get started if they want to do this, and how we at Computerworld can help people with that journey to moving from those legacy tools onward to Autopilot and Intune?
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to Computerworld, of course. When we embark on a project like this, we typically start by looking at whether you're in a situation where you can do Azure AD only, whether you could sort of ignore that on-prem AD bit, whether you're close enough on that cloud journey to make that leap and to say goodbye to group policy and some of the legacy technologies. And that will be different for each company. Assuming you've got some legacy, you've probably got some group policies that we're going to need to start analyzing. And there's various tools in Intune to allow you to do that, and we'll help guide you through that Very often when we look at group policies, it's more about reverse engineering what the business intention was behind that policy, which of course, if that policy was created 5-10 years ago, may be very different. So not just a case of looking blindly at what's in group policy and applying it in Intune. It's going to be saying, what was actually the business requirement that led to that being configured? Does that business requirement still hold, or have things changed? And very often things have changed. If you look back to what group policy was used for many, many years ago, it was all about stopping the user doing things. It was about taking things away from them, often in the name of security, often well-intentioned, but I would argue somewhat misguided. The settings that you've got in Intune are much more in tune with, see what I did there, much more in tune with the types of things that people want to do today, like, you know, ensuring that things are encrypted, etc.
Fantastic. So what we're going to do, we offer a strategy workshop where we can come in, we can look at what it is that is currently in place today. We're able to help demonstrate how it could be utilized and put together a plan for you moving forward to move your deployment and your initial configuration and your maintenance up to modern day standards to be that cloud-based. The bit that we've not really spoken about today, Ollie, and is probably the subject of a whole nother session, is then what does the onward journey look like? So once the user's got the device, once the initial configuration's done, how do we then cope with updates, with software deployments and stuff like that? And that's a really exciting topic. But people have got to take these first steps. You want to start with the deployment. You want to start with that alignment. You want to get off those legacy tools that you're going to be using. You want that flexibility to manage, maintain, and deploy it when out there. So thank you ever so much for your time today, Ollie. It's been really good to get an understanding of actually what Intune, what Autopilot aligned with Intune is, where those bits come together, and why it's so important to be considering that at the moment. I hope you've enjoyed watching our session today. If we can help you, please reach out to your Computer account manager or myself or Ollie. We've been more than happy to have a look into your specific requirements and help you with your onward journey. Thank you for watching.